This video covers section 6.1, Impacts Help Shape the Terrestrial Planets. Four processes have shaped the terrestrial worlds: impact cratering, tectonism, volcanism, and erosion. Tectonism is also called plate tectonics, which is known by the less precise name continental drift. Impact craters are high-velocity impacts of interplanetary material. Most of the leftover protostellar cloud debris is in the asteroid belt, but some of it remains in what is called Earth-crossing orbits. These orbits occasionally have collided with Earth, and evidence shows have collided with the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. Large impacts can result in huge releases of energy. This is the lunar crater Aristarchus, 42 kilometers in diameter, located west of Mare Imbrium. Such circular features, so obvious on the moon's surface, are impact craters formed when impactors smashed onto the surface. The explosion and excavation of materials at the impacted site created piles of rocks called ejecta around the circular hole, as well as bright streaks of target material called rays, thrown for great distances. Rocks thrown out of the crater and deposited as ring-shaped piles of debris at the crater's edge during the explosion and excavation of an impact event form raised rims. The floor is bowl-shaped or flat, characteristically below the ground level, unless filled up with lava. Central uplifts are mountains formed because of the huge increase and rapid decrease in pressure during the impact event. They occur only at the center of craters that are larger than 40 kilometers in diameter. The walls of the crater are characteristically steep and may have giant stairs called terraces. Cross-sectional diagrams here show the different stages of formation of an impact structure. At diameters less than 2 to 4 kilometers, a simple impact crater forms. When the diameter is greater than 2 to 4 kilometers, complex impact craters form. The time necessary to the formation of an impact crater, depending on the size of the impact event, is of the order of a few seconds to some minutes, and it can take up to a few hours for ejecta to be completely deposited. Target rocks are deformed and fractured, partially melted and vaporized as a result of catastrophic burst of energy. Asteroids and comets collided with the Earth at hypervelocity between 10 and 72 kilometers per second. The impactor is preceded by a shock wave, and in the first moments the ground is excavated by the impact. Rocks are fractured and shattered, moving in various directions, mainly upwards and out in the upper excavated zone and mainly down and outwards in the lower zone. The transient crater, typically 20 to 30 times larger than the projectile diameter, shows an uplifted rim. The initially steep walls of the transient crater collapsed under gravitational forces, forming characteristic terraces. The central upward lift occurs when the now fluid rocks rebound and cool rapidly. The meteor crater in northern Arizona is one of the best preserved craters known on Earth. It formed some 50,000 years ago when a 40-meter diameter chunk from an asteroid entered the atmosphere at a speed of 20 kilometers per second and struck the Earth at a 45-degree angle. The projectile massed about 300 million kilograms and contained a substantial amount of iron with a density around 8 grams per cubic centimeter or 8,000 kilograms per cubic meter. The resulting crater spans more than a kilometer and is more than 170 meters deep. Venus and Earth have relatively few visible craters, while Mercury and the Moon are almost completely covered with craters. That does not mean that Venus and Earth are younger than Mercury and the Moon. Earth has an extensive water which obliterates craters through the process of erosion. Craters on Mars suggest it had liquid water on its surface in the past, and that is, it shows signs of erosion that have changed the shape of the craters. The number of craters indicates the surface's age. More craters means an older surface and minimal geological activity. Tectonism and erosion can erase craters. Impact craters are classified into three types: preserved, modified, and destroyed. A preserved crater is a younger crater that looks new. It has a raised rim, and you can sometimes see ejecta blanket or a central peak. A modified crater has been changed by erosion from wind, water, or lava, or other impacts. Sometimes the ejecta is visible, but looks eroded. The crater may have a smooth floor partially filled in with material or sediment. Modified are middle-aged craters. A destroyed crater looks worn away. The rims are broken, and the crater has been severely changed or modified. The crater is almost completely filled in. These are very old craters. Can you classify the craters as being preserved, modified, destroyed, or not a crater? This crater is a preserved crater. It shows an ejecta blanket, the rim is undisturbed, and the central peak is clearly visible. Classify this crater as preserved, modified, destroyed, or not a crater. This is a destroyed crater. The crater is completely filled in and only remnants of the rim remain. Classify the crater as preserved, modified, destroyed, or not a crater. This is a modified crater. The crater is partially filled in and the rim shows some gaps. Classify this crater as preserved, modified, destroyed, or not a crater. This is another preserved crater. It shows an ejecta blanket, the rim is undisturbed, and the central peak is clearly visible. It looks new. The age of craters can be determined as either a relative age or an absolute age. Relative age can be found from cross-cutting relationships or the principle of superposition. Absolute age is found from the change detection or radioisotope concentrations, radiometric dating. The law of cross-cutting relations is the key principle behind relative dating of craters. It states that any geological feature, such as a rock structure or fault, that cuts across another geological feature must be younger. A crater in a lunar mare region must thus be younger than the mare, because the mare had to be present before the meteoroid could hit it, producing the crater that cut through it. If we see a crater sitting atop the rim of another, partially obliterating it, the superimposed crater must be younger. In the top image, the smaller crater appears in the upper left corner on the top and interrupting the rim of the larger crater. Common sense tells us that the larger crater must have formed before the rock that created the smaller crater could crash into it and destroy part of its rim. Relative ages for features over the entire planetary surface can be obtained by comparing the number of impact craters in different areas. The longer a surface has been exposed to meteoric bombardment, the more impact craters it could have acquired. Older surfaces thus have accumulated more impact craters than younger ones. The lower image shows a crater with a fracture running through it, meaning the crater existed before the fracture occurred. The principle of superposition is when one feature is on top of another feature, the feature on top is younger. The feature on the bottom is the older feature. Here we see crater 1 is partially covered by crater 2, so crater 1 is older. Crater 2 is partially covered by crater 3, so crater 2 is older than crater 3, and by inference, crater 1 is the oldest and crater 3 is the youngest. The figure here shows the results of cratering experiments conducted in the laboratory here on Earth. In the first frame in the upper left-hand corner shows an initially smooth surface one which is then exposed to a steady bombardment of small particles of various sizes. The time-lapse sequence of images, when time increasing from left to right and then top to bottom, illustrates the sequence of degradation of the surface. Note how, as the surface gets older, it presents a steadily increasing number of craters. The age associated with each image could be estimated by counting the number of superposed craters atop the surface. Crater counts can be used to establish relative ages for surfaces. If average cratering rate, the number of new craters created per unit area, is known, counts can be used to estimate ages for surface features. The basic idea is that older surfaces are more heavily cratered, so age is proportional to the surface density of craters. Complicating factors include the inability to correct for numerous secondary craters produced by secondary projectiles thrown up from the primary projectile, and lava or water flows that can obliterate craters. Given the moon's minimal surface activity of late, it is safe to assume that once widespread lunar lava flows ended, few or no craters were erased from the record. Rank the relative ages from oldest to youngest. Since C overlaps B, C is younger than B. B and C are both located on the floor of crater A, making A the oldest. The correct order is A, B, C. Rank the relative ages from oldest to youngest. Crater A is crossed by a fracture C, making A older than C. Crater A is located on surface B, which had to exist before the crater was made. The correct order is B, A, C. This crater appeared somewhere between 5 May 2003 and 29 April 2005. We can only narrow it down further if other evidence comes forward, such observations of a flash of light in the same area. The crater here is located in Arabia Terra on Mars, taken from the Mars Global Surveyor, and shows an impact site and extensive rays developing during an impact event. These data were acquired during March, April, and May 2006. These pictures show how the age of the crater was constrained. The first on the left is a portion of the mock red wide-angle camera image acquired 8 December 2003. The white circle indicates the location of the impact site, but the impact had not yet occurred. The second picture on the right shows the same mock red wide-angle image overlaid portion of the image from the Mars Odyssey Thermal Emission Imaging System, THAMIS. The THAMIS image is an infrared picture at 12.6 micrometers, acquired on 26 November 2005. In the infrared image, the impact site shows up as a bright spot because it is warmer than the surroundings during the day. These two pictures tell us that the impact occurred sometime between 8 December 2003 and 26 November 2005. Images of dramatic fresh impact crater taken by the NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter on November 19, 2013. The crater was formed sometime between July 2010 and May 2012. The crater spans approximately 100 feet in diameter and is surrounded by a large rayed blast zone. The final method of dating is radiometric dating. Radiometric dating requires a sample taken to the lab for analysis. So far, only lunar samples, meteorites, and Mars meteorites have undergone radiometric analysis. Mars meteorites are associated with Mars by their composition. Radioactive decay of uranium was discovered in 1896 by French scientist Henri Becquerel. Possibility of dating using radioactivity was proposed by British scientist Lord Rutherford in 1905. The first list of geological ages based on radiometric dating was published by Yale radiochemist Professor B.B. Boltwood in 1907. Precise radiometric dating has been accomplished since 1950. A chemical element consists of atoms with a specific number of protons in their nuclei but different atomic weights owing to variations in the number of neutrons. Atoms of the same element with differing atomic weights are called isotopes. Radioactive decay is a spontaneous process in which an isotope, the parent, loses particles from its nucleus to form an isotope of a new element, the daughter. The rate of decay is conveniently expressed in terms of the isotope's half-life, or the time it takes for one half of a particular radioactive isotope in a sample to decay. Most radioactive isotopes have rapid rates of decay, that is, short half-lives, and lose their radioactivity within days or years. Some isotopes, however, decay slowly, and several of these are used for geological clocks. The parent isotopes and corresponding daughter products most commonly used to determine the ages of ancient rocks are listed in the figure. Carbon dating, probably the most familiar dating method, cannot be used to date rocks. Carbon dating can only be used to date once living material and cannot date anything older than 50,000 years. Ancient rocks exceeding 3.5 billion years in age are found on all of Earth's continents. The oldest rocks on Earth found so far are the Acasta gneiss in northwestern Canada near the Great Slave Lake, 4.03 billion years old, and in the Insua supercrustal rocks in West Greenland, 3.7 to 3.8 billion years old. But well-studied rocks nearly as old are also found in the Minnesota River Valley and northern Michigan, 3.5 to 3.7 billion years old, and Swaziland, 3.4 to 3.5 billion years old, and in Western Australia, 3.4 to 3.6 billion years old. The Mars meteorite EETA 79001 found in Antarctica has been dated to 2.1 billion years old. The Mars Curiosity rover drilled for a sample on Mars where scientists nicknamed Cumberland, and this is the first ever to be dated from an analysis of its mineral ingredients while it sits on another planet. A report by Kenneth Farley of the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena and co-authors estimates the age of Cumberland at 3.86 billion to 4.56 billion years old. Moonrock 67215, returned by Apollo 16 from North Ray crater, has been dated to 4.4 billion years. It formed around 100 million years after the formation of the moon. In 1969, a 2-ton meteor broke up in the atmosphere above the Mexican village of Allende. The stony Allende meteorite is peppered with white particles of aluminum oxide and calcium oxide. Except for hydrogen and helium, they are about the same composition as the Sun, and they are believed to be remnants of the first solid grains that formed in the solar system. Dated to 4.566 billion years old, they are the oldest known objects. Many craters on Earth have been identified. This map shows the known craters on Earth. The red dot between Mexico and Cuba formed 65 million years ago and is thought to be an impact responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs. Called Chicxulub, the crater is 170 kilometers across. In 1908, a large object struck the Earth over the remote region of Tunguska, Russia. Because of the remoteness and the Russian Revolution, the first expedition didn't occur until 1927. The blast had flattened millions of trees in a broad butterfly-shaped swath, covering more than 2,000 square kilometers. In 1975, Ari Ben Menahem, a seismologist at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, estimated the energy released by the explosion to be between 10 and 15 megatons in magnitude. Models by Christopher Chiba, then at NASA Ames Research Center, and his colleagues proposed in 1993 that the asteroid was a few tens of meters in diameter and that it exploded several kilometers above the ground. Despite what people think, it wasn't a black hole or the explosion of an alien spacecraft. What probably fragments of the Tunguska blast were found in 1988. These reveal a stony asteroid composition. On 15 February 2013, an object entered the atmosphere and exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia. With an estimated mass of 13,000 to 14,000 tons and measuring about 20 meters in diameter, the light from the meteor was visible up to 100 kilometers away. Some 7,200 buildings in 6 cities across the region were damaged by the explosion's shock wave. About 1,500 people were injured, seriously enough to seek medical treatment. The Earth is struck by objects on a daily basis. Most of them are small and insignificant. Occasionally, larger objects strike the Earth. Objects like the one that formed Meteor Crater strike every 10,000 years. The last one of that size struck Earth occurred in 1908 in Tunguska, Russia. Events as large as the Ch06 occur once every 100 million years. Caloris Basin is a very large impact feature on Mercury, ringed by concentric mountain ranges. Venus shows several impact craters, a few kilometers up to 280 kilometers. This Magellan image is of the northeastern Atlanta region of Venus, is approximately 185 kilometers wide at the base, and shows Dickinson, an impact crater 69 kilometers in diameter. This crater is complex and characterized by partial central ring and a floor flooded by radar dark and radar bright materials. Its hummocky, rough textured ejecta extend all around the crater except to the west. The lack of ejecta to the west may indicate that the impactor produced the crater was an oblique impact from the west. Extensive radar bright flows emanate from the crater's eastern walls and may represent large volumes of impact melt, or they may be the result of volcanic material released from the subsurface during the cratering event. The crater on the right is taken by Viking 1 orbiter view of Yucti crater on Mars. It's an 18-kilometer crater that was surrounded by a complex ejecta lobes, one of which partly covers an older crater. The moon's south pole is near the top of the sharp telescopic view looking across the southern lunar highlands, recorded on the 3rd of August from Tecumseh, Oklahoma. The foreshortened perspective heightens the impression of a dense field of craters and makes the craters themselves appear more oval-shaped. The prominent crater in the foreground, Mauritius, has a diameter of 114 kilometers and lies just west-left of the moon's central meridian. 4 large lunar craters. Mauritius is young and features terraced inner walls and a 2.5-kilometer high bright central peak, similar in appearance to the more northerly crater Tycho. Just to the right of Mauritius is a 95-kilometer diameter crater Curtius. Curtius has older rounded walls marked by smaller, more recent impact craters. Oriental is the youngest and best preserved lunar basin. It is the best guide to the structure of impact basins in the solar system. For most on the moon, and other planets are more strongly modified by lava or later impacts. Oriental's conspicuous outer or Cordillera rim has a diameter of 930 kilometers. Outer Rook Ring is 480 kilometers and Inner Rook is 320 kilometers. Strong radial lineations made by scouring flow of ejecta is especially visible at the top. On closer approach to Jupiter comet, Shoemaker-Levy was broken into fragments called a string of pearls. On the 16th of July 1994, the fragment struck Jupiter. While not producing craters, it did produce spectacular results. In summary, all terrestrial planets were shaped by craters shortly after their formation. Volcanism, erosion, and tectonics reshaped the surfaces of the terrestrial planets. Relative dating involves cross-cutting relations, surface density of craters, and looking at the preservation of the craters. Absolute dating involves radiometric analysis and temporal analysis, looking at before and after images.